The Duke ordered every gentleman in the ballroom to refuse his wife's hand. "Tonight," he declared, "the Duchess will dance alone and understand what becomes of a woman without my protection." The orchestra fell silent before the final word had finished echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers. Duchess Eleanor Ashcombe stood in the center of the polished floor, surrounded by nearly 200 guests who had come to celebrate the 10th anniversary of her husband's succession. A moment earlier, several gentlemen had been waiting to enter her name upon their dance cards. Now, they lowered their eyes and stepped backward, as though disgrace could be caught by standing too near her. Eleanor looked past them toward Adrian, Duke of Ashcombe. He stood beside Lady Lavinia Vale, whose pale fingers rested possessively upon his sleeve. Around Lavinia's throat glittered the emerald necklace that had belonged to Eleanor's mother, the necklace Adrian had taken from Eleanor's dressing table that morning and called a temporary sacrifice for the family's honor. Eleanor had not known until now whom he intended to adorn with it. "You searched my rooms, dismissed my secretary, and accused me without allowing me to answer," Eleanor said, keeping her voice level. "Was that not humiliation enough?" Adrian's expression did not soften. "A forged account bearing your cipher diverted £12,000 from the Western estates. 3 letters in your hand instructed the steward to conceal it. You will not speak to me of humiliation. The handwriting resembles mine. The cipher does not." "Enough." The word struck harder than a shout, because it carried the authority of a husband who had already decided what the room must believe. Eleanor had spent 6 years studying every Ashcombe ledger, negotiating grain prices, establishing relief funds, and preventing the Western tenants from losing their cottages after 2 failed harvests. Adrian had once praised her mind in private. That morning, when Lavinia produced the letters, he had refused Eleanor's request for 1 hour to examine the paper and seal. He had chosen the accusation because believing it served his pride more conveniently than admitting his estate depended upon his wife. The musicians raised their bows with uncertain hands. "Play," Adrian commanded. The first notes of the waltz trembled through the ballroom. Eleanor remained alone, while couples formed around its edges. Lady Lavinia's smile was small enough to escape anyone who was not watching for it. Eleanor was watching. She saw Lavinia touch the emerald necklace and noticed a hardened drop of violet sealing wax clinging to the gold bracelet at her wrist. The same rare violet wax sealed every letter used against Eleanor. Adrian had seen that unfamiliar color that morning. He knew Eleanor's writing desk contained only black wax for estate correspondence and red for private letters. Yet when she pointed this out, he had accused her of destroying the matching stick. Eleanor moved 1 step closer to Lavinia. "Where did you obtain violet sealing wax?" Lavinia's smile vanished. Her fingers closed over the bracelet. Adrian immediately placed himself between them. "You will not redirect suspicion toward the woman who exposed you. Then ask her to show you her wrist. I will not permit you to insult her further." Eleanor stared at her husband and understood that this was the moment their marriage truly ended. Not when he searched her room, not when he took her mother's necklace, but now, when the evidence was visible and he deliberately refused to look. She removed her wedding glove and placed it on the silver tray beside the disputed letters. "Very well," she said, "but when the truth is uncovered, remember that I asked you to look." A heavy door opened above the ballroom. The music faltered as every face turned toward the grand staircase. A tall man stood beneath the archway, dressed in a dark burgundy coat still marked with dust from the road. A pale scar crossed one side of his jaw and disappeared beneath his collar. Lord Sebastian Ashcombe had been banished from the family 7 years earlier, after the fire that killed the old Duke and left Sebastian so gravely injured that society believed he had never spoken again. Adrian went rigid. "You were forbidden to enter this house." Sebastian began descending the marble stairs without answering. Guests moved aside as he reached the ballroom floor and walked toward Eleanor. His gaze passed briefly over the emerald necklace, the violet wax on Lavinia's bracelet, and the letters displayed upon the tray. Then he stopped before the Duchess and extended his hand. Eleanor hesitated. Accepting it would openly defy her husband, but refusing would allow Adrian's cruelty to become the final image of the evening. She placed her hand in Sebastian's. His fingers closed around hers with careful steadiness. "Release my wife," Adrian ordered. Sebastian turned toward his brother. For the first time in 7 years, his voice cut through Ashcombe Hall. "If she forged those letters, brother, explain why I watched Lavinia write every one of them." A gasp swept across the ballroom. Lavinia stepped backward, but Sebastian had not finished. He drew a folded document from inside his coat and placed it beside the accusation. And explain why those stolen £12,000 were transferred under your own signature. Adrian stared at the document as the blood drained from his face. Eleanor leaned closer and recognized the authorization at once. It was unquestionably her husband's hand, but beneath it appeared a second signature belonging to a man who had supposedly died in the fire 7 years earlier. Eleanor looked from the second signature to Sebastian's scarred face. The name written beneath Adrian's authorization was Lord Percival Vale, Lavinia's father, a man whose coffin Eleanor had watched being lowered into the family vault 7 years ago. That is impossible, Adrian said, though his voice no longer carried the certainty with which he had condemned his wife. Lavinia recovered first. Of course it is impossible. Lord Sebastian has returned after years of exile, carrying a forged document, and yet everyone behaves as though his word were sacred. She reached for the paper, but Eleanor placed her bare hand over it. Do not touch it. Lavinia's eyes flashed. You have no authority here. Not according to my husband, Eleanor replied. But I still know how evidence must be preserved. She folded the document without pressing the ink, wrapped it in her discarded glove, and handed it to Mr. Alden, the elderly family solicitor standing near the musicians. He had advised Eleanor's father before her marriage and had taught her how to compare contracts, watermarks, and signatures while she was still young enough to sit beneath his desk during business meetings. Keep this upon your person, she told him. Record who gave it to you, who witnessed the transfer, and do not surrender it without my consent or a magistrate's order. Mr. Alden glanced toward Adrian. For one strained moment, Eleanor expected him to obey the Duke instead. Then he placed the wrapped document inside his coat. I shall do precisely as Her Grace requests. Adrian's jaw tightened. This remains my house. Then perhaps you should begin protecting it, Sebastian said. The bluntness of his voice seemed to shock the room almost as deeply as hearing him speak at all. Eleanor felt his hand withdraw from hers, but he remained beside her, rather than taking the place of authority she had claimed for herself. Where did you obtain that document? She asked him. From a courier outside Dover 3 nights ago. He had been paid to carry it to a creditor in Calais. Paid by whom? A man using Percival Vale's name. Lavinia gave a brittle laugh. A convenient story from a man who has hated his brother since childhood. Sebastian's expression did not change, but Eleanor saw his left hand curl at his side. I did not return for Adrian. His gaze shifted to her. I returned because the western villages will be seized within 12 days if the debt is not challenged. The words struck Eleanor with greater force than the public humiliation. The stolen £12,000 had been reserved for winter grain, roof repairs, and the drainage works protecting 300 tenant families from another flood. Without it, the estate would not merely suffer embarrassment. Children would go hungry, labourers would be evicted, and creditors would gain control of land Eleanor had spent years restoring. The Western Fund cannot be pledged as security, she said. Its deed of trust forbids it. It did, Lavinia replied softly. Eleanor turned. What do you mean? Adrian answered, without meeting her eyes. I amended the arrangement 6 weeks ago. For the first time that evening, Eleanor's composure nearly broke. You altered the trust? Lavinia showed me projections, demonstrating that the dormant capital could strengthen our parliamentary interests. Dormant? Eleanor repeated. That money purchases seed and medicine. It supports the cottages when rents fail. You knew its purpose. I believed the estate required a more ambitious use of its resources, and you signed without consulting me. Adrian looked toward the watching guests, as if her insistence upon truth offended him more than his own admission. You are my wife, not my steward. Eleanor felt the last remnant of hope inside her go still. For 6 years he had accepted every improvement her work produced, while treating the work itself as a charming domestic pastime. Now his contempt had not only endangered her reputation, it had opened the estate to whoever was operating behind Percival Vale's name. Then hear me as your wife for the final time, she said. You will not use my presence to reassure the tenants, defend your signature, or conceal what you have done. Until you publicly withdraw your accusation and restore my access to the accounts, I will perform no duty on behalf of this house. Murmurs spread through the ballroom. Adrian stared at her, as though she had spoken in a foreign language. You cannot simply abandon your obligations. You relieved me of them this morning. Sebastian's mouth tightened. Not quite a smile, but something like respect. Lavinia stepped toward Adrian and lowered her voice, though Eleanor still heard her. Send her to the dower house before she turns the entire county against you. That suggestion revealed more than Lavinia intended. The dower house stood near the Western Records office, where duplicate rent rolls and trust receipts were stored. If Eleanor were confined there, she would be isolated, but she would also be dangerously close to documents Lavinia clearly wished to control. An excellent idea, Eleanor said. I shall leave for the dower house tonight. Lavinia's face paled. Adrian shook his head. You will remain in your rooms until I decide what is to be done. Then you must order the footmen to imprison me before all these witnesses. Silence settled over the ballroom. Adrian could humiliate her, but he was not yet willing to be seen using force. Eleanor turned to Mr. Alden. Arrange a carriage. Then she looked at Sebastian. You said you watched Lavinia write the letters. I want the entire truth, including why you remained silent until tonight. Sebastian's gaze moved toward the upper gallery. A shadow had disappeared behind the curtain near the room where the Western ledgers were temporarily kept. I will tell you, he said, but if we do not reach that room now, there may be no letters left to examine. Eleanor gathered her skirts and moved toward the staircase before Adrian could forbid her. Sebastian followed close behind, while Mr. Alden remained below with the wrapped document secured inside his coat. The guests watched in breathless silence, no longer certain whether they had attended a ball or witnessed the beginning of a family trial. At the top of the stairs, Eleanor found the gallery empty, but the curtain beside the Western Records room still trembled. A sharp smell of smoke reached her before she touched the door. Someone is burning the ledgers, she said. Sebastian drove his shoulder against the locked panel. The wood split on the second blow, revealing flames rising from a copper brazier in the center of the room. Pages curled black at the edges, while a hooded figure escaped through the servants' passage. Sebastian moved to pursue, but Eleanor caught his sleeve. Save the books. A servant can disappear into 20 corridors, but burned accounts cannot be questioned. Together, they overturned the brazier and smothered the flames beneath a thick carpet. Eleanor dropped to her knees beside the scorched pages, separating them before the damp ink could spread. Several rent rolls had been destroyed, but one narrow volume remained largely intact. It was the Western Disbursement Ledger, bound in plain brown calfskin with a brass clasp. Eleanor recognized it because she had personally designed its double-entry columns after discovering unexplained losses 3 years earlier. This is not the original, she said. Sebastian crouched beside her. How can you tell? She opened the cover and pointed to a row of tiny needle holes along the spine. I stitched a blue silk marker between every quarterly section. Someone removed them, then rebound copied pages inside the original cover. She turned to the final entry and found her own name beside a payment of £2,000 to a London jeweller. I have never dealt with this man. The writing is convincing, because it was copied from my household orders, but the figures are formed incorrectly. Eleanor traced the number 7 with one finger. I cross mine in all financial records. My father taught me to do so because a clerk once changed a 7 into a 1 and nearly ruined one of his shipping contracts. Whoever forged this knew my handwriting, but not the reason behind my habits. Sebastian looked toward the open servants' passage. Lavinia has lived here for 4 months. She has seen every note you sent downstairs. And this morning Adrian gave her my keys. Footsteps sounded behind them. Adrian entered with Lavinia upon his arm and 2 footmen at his back. He took in the broken door, the extinguished brazier, and the ruined accounts. What have you done? We prevented someone from destroying what remains of your Western records, Eleanor replied. Lavinia pressed a hand to her mouth. Or they were caught burning evidence of the Duchess's theft. Sebastian rose so quickly that one footman reached for his baton. Eleanor remained kneeling, refusing to let Lavinia draw attention away from the ledger. If I intended to destroy this book, why would I preserve it? To present the pages that support your story, Lavinia answered. A clever woman can manufacture innocence as easily as guilt. Adrian bent and lifted the ledger. Eleanor showed him the false 7s and the missing silk markers. For an instant, uncertainty entered his face. He had seen her accounts for years. He knew she crossed every 7. The entries are inconsistent, he admitted. Lavinia tightened her hold upon his arm. Because she deliberately altered her style when she stole the money. Surely that is obvious. Adrian's hesitation disappeared beneath the relief of being offered an explanation that required no admission of fault. It is possible. Eleanor stood slowly. Soot stained her gloves and the hem of her blue gown, but her voice remained calm. Everything is possible when you prefer possibility to examination. A frightened movement near the servants' passage caught her eye. A young housemaid stood half hidden behind the damaged door, clutching a brass coal shovel. Eleanor recognized Clara Finch, whose widowed mother lived in one of the western cottages. "Clara, did you see who left this room?" The maid looked at Lavinia and began trembling. I saw no face, Your Grace." "Did you see anything else?" Clara swallowed. "A green ribbon caught upon the latch, and I heard a woman say that the coach must reach Dover before dawn." Lavinia's evening slippers were tied with green ribbons. One bow was missing. Adrian noticed it at the same moment Eleanor did. His gaze dropped to Lavinia's exposed ankle, then moved toward the strip of green silk hanging from the passage latch. Lavinia released his arm and stepped forward. "Half the women downstairs are wearing green, but only one of them had access to this room," Eleanor said. "You did, from the moment my husband handed you my keys." Adrian looked between them. Eleanor saw the conflict in his eyes and waited for him to choose truth, while the evidence still stood before him. Instead, he turned to the footman. "Escort Lady Lavinia back to the ballroom. No one is to accuse her without conclusive proof." "And Clara?" Eleanor asked. Lavinia answered before Adrian could. "A servant who invents stories against a guest should be dismissed." Clara's face crumpled. Eleanor stepped between the maid and the footman. "Clara remains under my protection. Her mother's cottage is supported by the Western Trust, and that makes her a witness with everything to lose." Adrian's mouth hardened. "You surrendered your household duties. I surrendered service to you. I did not surrender responsibility for those endangered by your choices." Eleanor removed the green ribbon from the latch, using a clean sheet of paper, folded it carefully, and gave it to Sebastian. "Keep this separate from the ledger." Lavinia watched the transfer with a coldness that stripped every trace of gentleness from her face. In that moment, Eleanor knew Lavinia no longer regarded her as a disgraced wife who could be pushed aside. She regarded her as the only person capable of reconstructing what had been stolen. A bell rang from the courtyard below. One of the footmen crossed to the window and looked down. "Your Grace, a carriage has just departed through the north gate." Sebastian reached the glass beside him. "The Dover coach." Eleanor turned toward Adrian. "Order the gate closed." Adrian issued the command, but another servant appeared in the doorway, pale and breathless. "It is too late, Your Grace." Lady Lavinia's secretary carried a leather dispatch case, and he had a travel warrant bearing your seal. Adrian's hand moved instinctively toward his signet ring. It was still on his finger. Eleanor looked at the violet wax on Lavinia's bracelet and understood the purpose of the letters at last. The forgeries had not merely concealed stolen money. Someone had duplicated the Duke's seal, obtained his genuine signature, and was now carrying documents to Dover that could legally surrender the Western estates before sunrise. "Then we stop that coach before it reaches the coast," Eleanor said. Adrian turned toward the footman. "Ready my fastest horses." "Your fastest team cannot overtake a carriage with nearly an hour's advantage," Eleanor replied. "Not on the Dover road." His expression sharpened. "Have you a better proposal?" "Yes. The North Road floods near Bellman's Hollow whenever the mill sluice is raised. Any driver carrying valuable papers will avoid it and turn east through Wexford village. I designed the drainage channels there, and I know the only bridge strong enough for a loaded coach." Adrian's eyes narrowed, irritated that the solution came from the woman he had just declared unworthy of his protection. "How long?" "If Sebastian and I ride across the old tenant path, we can reach the bridge before them." "You will do no such thing. Those estates were pledged because you signed a document you did not understand. You may remain here guarding Lady Lavinia's feelings, but I am going." Sebastian was already moving toward the stable stairs when Adrian caught Eleanor's arm. "You will not ride into the night with my brother." She looked down at his hand until he released her. "A few minutes ago, you commanded every man in your ballroom to reject me. You cannot now invoke the privileges of a husband while denying every duty attached to them." Lavinia stepped between them. "This performance is unnecessary. Send armed men." "Armed men do not know the marsh path," Eleanor said, and whoever carries the forged warrant may destroy it upon seeing the Duke's livery. Clara, still standing near the passage, lifted her coal shovel with both hands. My brother keeps ponies at the lower dairy, Your Grace. They are small, but they know the tenant path. Eleanor gave the maid a grateful look. Show us. Within minutes, she had exchanged her satin slippers for a groom's boots and covered her blue gown with a dark riding cloak. Sebastian waited in the courtyard beside two sturdy ponies, his expression unreadable beneath the lantern light. Adrian descended the steps as Eleanor placed one foot in the stirrup. I am coming. Why? She asked. To recover my property. The answer hurt less than it should have, because it confirmed what she already knew. He had not come to protect the tenants, clear her name, or repair his reckless decision. He came because the stolen document threatened his authority. Take the main road with your men, she said. If they double back, you may intercept them. Sebastian and I will go through Wexford. Adrian mounted without arguing further. But before turning away, he looked at his brother. If any harm comes to her. The harm already came, Sebastian replied. You invited it into your ballroom. Eleanor urged her pony forward before their anger could consume the minutes they could not spare. The tenant path ran between dark fields and low stone walls, narrowing until branches tore at her cloak. Sebastian rode behind her without complaint, trusting each turn she chose. When they reached Wexford, Eleanor found half the village awake. Men and women stood around an empty grain store, shouting beneath raised lanterns. A creditor's notice had been nailed to its door, declaring all Western supplies seized against the Duke of Ashcombe's unpaid obligation. Mrs. Finch, Clara's mother, clutched the notice with shaking hands. Your Grace, they took the winter sacks this afternoon. Lady Lavinia's secretary said you had sold them. Eleanor dismounted and read the document. Her supposed signature appeared at the bottom, but again, the number 7 lacked its crossbar. I sold nothing, she said loudly enough for the villagers to hear. This paper is false. A broad-shouldered farmer pushed through the crowd. The secretary showed us a letter saying you ordered the grain removed. Did he leave it? No, Your Grace. But he gave the same explanation you used last year, when you moved the reserve before the river flooded. Eleanor understood the cruelty of the scheme. Lavinia had copied not only her writing, but her methods, turning Eleanor's greatest success into evidence against her. The previous winter, Eleanor had moved 300 sacks to higher ground, one day before the storehouse flooded. Now that act of foresight had made the villagers believe a second removal must also be hers. Last year, I sent blue carts marked with the estate crest, she said. What carried the grain today? Mrs. Finch answered immediately. 2 black wagons with no markings. Then the grain was not moved for protection. It was stolen. She climbed onto the storehouse step so everyone could see her. The Western Fund has been compromised, but I swear no family will lose its food while I still possess anything of my own. She removed the diamond brooch from her cloak and placed it in Mrs. Finch's hands. It had been a wedding gift from Adrian and was one of the few jewels not held under the family settlement. Take this to Mr. Alden tomorrow. He will arrange its sale and purchase replacement grain. Sebastian stared at her. That brooch is worth more than the entire shipment. Then the remainder will repair the cottages. Mrs. Finch closed Eleanor's fingers around it again. We cannot take your jewels. You are not taking them. I am paying a debt created by the house whose name I bear. The farmer stepped forward. His hostility had changed into shame. The black wagons went east, but a closed carriage passed 10 minutes ago and turned toward the old toll bridge. Eleanor mounted again. As she and Sebastian rode away, the villagers began pulling carts across the road behind them, blocking any retreat toward Ashcombe. It was a small victory, but it belonged to Eleanor, not to the Duke, whose authority had failed them. At the old bridge, they found the Dover carriage trapped behind a fallen tree. Lavinia's secretary stood beside it, arguing with the driver. When he saw Eleanor, he seized the leather dispatch case and ran toward the river. Sebastian dismounted and pursued him, but the secretary drew a pistol. Eleanor saw the weapon before Sebastian did. Down! She shouted. The shot exploded through the darkness. Sebastian fell behind the stone parapet as Eleanor's pony reared. She struck the ground hard, pain flashing through her shoulder, but she forced herself upright. The secretary had reached the riverbank and was holding the dispatch case above the current. Eleanor did not run toward him. She looked at the carriage instead, and noticed its rear axle sinking beneath the weight of several hidden crates. "The documents are not all in that case," she called. "The wax and seal press are inside the carriage." The secretary froze. That single hesitation betrayed her guess. Sebastian rose, crossed the distance, and knocked the pistol from his hand. Moments later, hoofbeats thundered from the main road. Adrian arrived with 4 armed men and saw Sebastian restraining the secretary while Eleanor opened the first crate. Inside lay sticks of violet wax, blank Ashcombe stationery, the missing blue silk markers, and a metal seal carved with a perfect copy of the Duke's crest. Beneath them rested the original Western ledger in Eleanor's true handwriting. She placed the genuine book beside the forged one Adrian had brought from the house. "Now, you have both versions," she said. "The cross sevens, the paper, the entries, and the binding can all be compared. No explanation is required from me. You can verify the truth with your own eyes." Adrian stared at the 2 ledgers, finally faced with evidence no one could interpret for him. Then Lavinia's secretary began to laugh. "Compare them if you wish, Your Grace. By sunrise, your wife will still be guilty because the original ledger contains a payment she has never told you about." Adrian seized the original ledger and turned its pages beneath the carriage lamp. Lavinia's secretary, Mr. Crow, sat on the wet ground with his wrists bound by a groom's leather reins, yet his smile remained confident. "Page 114, he said. "The Duchess recorded it herself. Eleanor knew the entry before Adrian found it. 3 years earlier, she had transferred £800 from her private marriage portion to a physician in Brussels. She had concealed the recipient's name beneath a numerical reference because disclosure would have exposed a secret that did not belong to her." Adrian stopped at the marked page. £800 paid to Dr. Etienne Moreau, he read. No stated purpose, no estate authorization. His eyes lifted to her. "What did you purchase?" "Nothing for myself." "Then for whom?" Eleanor looked toward Sebastian. His face had become ashen beneath the scar. The money had paid for the surgeries that restored his damaged throat after the fire. Sebastian had written to Eleanor in desperation because Adrian had forbidden anyone in the family from assisting the brother he blamed for their father's death. Eleanor had funded the treatment from money settled for her personal use, but revealing that now would expose Sebastian's hiding place, his years of recovery, and the correspondence that had helped him survive. More importantly, it would allow Adrian to transform one private act of mercy into another accusation of disloyalty. "The funds came from my marriage portion," she said. "They were legally designated for my personal expenses. That does not answer me. It is the only answer you are entitled to receive." Adrian's face hardened. "My wife secretly sent a fortune abroad to a foreign physician, and on the same night, I discover letters diverting estate money toward the coast. You expect me to treat the 2 matters as unrelated? The dates are separated by 3 years. Schemes often begin long before they are discovered." Sebastian stepped forward. "The payment was for me." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. He had surrendered the secret she had protected at great cost, but there was no hesitation in his voice. "After the fire, the doctors in England said the damage to my throat could not be repaired. Eleanor found Moreau's published work and paid him from her own funds. She asked nothing in return." Adrian stared at his brother. "You corresponded with my wife behind my back. I begged your wife for the help you refused me. I refused you because father died while you escaped. Father died because Percival Vale locked the library doors and set the eastern corridor alight." Even Crow's smile disappeared. The river rushed beneath the bridge, while Adrian stood motionless, gripping the ledger hard enough to bend its cover. "That is a lie." Sebastian unfastened his collar and revealed an uneven line of burn scars across his throat. "I saw Vale carrying account books from father's study before the flames spread. When I confronted him, he struck me and left me inside. I survived by breaking a window. By the time I could speak clearly enough to accuse him, you had already banished me and announced to the county that grief had driven me mad." Eleanor watched the truth approach Adrian and saw him retreat from it. Accepting Sebastian's account would mean admitting that he had condemned both his brother and his wife, because believing the Vale family had been easier than examining his own choices. "Convenient," Adrian said at last. 7 years of silence, and now you return with accusations against a dead man and his daughter. You have the forged seal in front of you. Eleanor said. You have 2 ledgers, a witness, stolen stationery, and the secretary who attempted to destroy the dispatch case. What more must truth do before you permit yourself to see it? Crow leaned against the bridge wall. Perhaps your grace should ask why Lord Sebastian waited until Lady Lavinia came to Ashcombe before returning. Perhaps the Duchess promised him more than money. Adrian turned toward Eleanor. The suspicion in his eyes was so immediate that it revealed how eagerly he had been waiting for another reason to blame her. Did you arrange his return? No. Have you met him during our marriage? Never. But you exchanged letters. Only concerning his treatment. Letters you concealed from me. Sebastian moved between them. Do not twist her kindness into adultery. Adrian's fist struck him across the mouth. Sebastian staggered, but did not retaliate. Eleanor stepped forward, and Adrian caught her wrist. You defended a man I cast out. You hid money, correspondence, and his whereabouts. Now he appears in my ballroom and takes your hand before the entire county, because you ordered every other man to refuse it. The words silenced even Crow. Adrian released her as though burned, but the shame upon his face quickly became anger. He called the captain of his riders forward. Take Sebastian and the Duchess back to Ashcombe under guard. Confine my brother in the East Tower and my wife in her rooms until a magistrate examines the accounts. You have the evidence of my innocence in your hands, Eleanor said. I have evidence that my household has been deceived. I do not yet know by whom. You know, she replied. You simply prefer a version that preserves your pride. Adrian turned to the captain. Do it. The officer hesitated. He had served Eleanor for 6 years and knew the grain stores had survived because of her judgment. Your Grace, perhaps Mr. Alden should first compare the books. Are you refusing my command? The captain lowered his eyes. No, Your Grace. 2 riders approached Eleanor, visibly ashamed. She did not resist. This was Adrian's irreversible choice, made not in ignorance but in full view of the forged seal, the genuine ledger, and the secretary caught carrying them. He placed the original book inside his saddlebag and ordered another man to guard the crates. In doing so, he took every piece of evidence out of Eleanor's custody and placed it beneath his own authority, the same authority Lavinia had already penetrated. As they prepared to leave, Crow spoke quietly to Adrian. If you wish to know who truly forged your signature, offer me protection from the Duchess and her brother. Eleanor saw Lavinia's design at once. Crow had been caught so that he could enter the house as a prisoner, gain access to Adrian, and redirect suspicion before the evidence could be examined. Do not take him to Ashcombe, she warned. Send him directly to the county magistrate. Adrian mounted. I will decide where my prisoner is questioned. Eleanor looked at the dispatch case, the ledgers, and the counterfeit seal being loaded into separate saddlebags. Then record every person who touches them. Enough. The journey back began beneath a paling sky. Eleanor rode between 2 guards, while Sebastian followed with blood drying at the corner of his mouth. When Ashcombe Hall appeared beyond the trees, smoke was rising from the eastern side. A servant galloped toward them, shouting before he reached the gates. Your Grace, the Western Records room has burned completely. Lady Lavinia ordered us not to enter because she said the Duchess had left poison inside. Adrian looked toward the flames, finally understanding that his decision to leave Lavinia in control had given her time to destroy the remaining evidence. Then, he reached for the saddlebag containing the original ledger. The strap hung open. The book was gone. Adrian pulled the saddlebag from his horse and emptied it onto the gravel. A pistol, 2 gloves, a coil of rope, and the forged ledger struck the ground, but the original book was nowhere among them. Who rode beside me? He demanded. No one answered. His 4 men exchanged uneasy looks until the youngest guard admitted that Crow had stumbled during the journey and been lifted briefly across Adrian's saddle while his bonds were tightened. That single contact had been enough. Crow had removed the original ledger, passed it to someone on the road, or concealed it before entering the gates. Eleanor looked toward the prisoner. He was still bound, yet his satisfaction had returned. Search him, Adrian ordered. The guards found no book, only a small brass key and a scrap of violet wax hidden inside his boot. Where is it? Adrian asked. Crow smiled. Perhaps the Duchess took it. She has already proved herself skilled at moving money and secrets. Adrian struck him, but violence could not restore evidence lost through carelessness. Eleanor turned toward the burning wing. Servants were carrying buckets from the fountain, though the flames had already consumed the roof above the records room. Lady Lavinia stood safely beneath the entrance portico, wrapped in Eleanor's silver evening cloak. The emerald necklace still gleamed at her throat. "Thank heaven you returned," she said to Adrian. "I discovered the fire moments after receiving a note in the Duchess's handwriting. It warned me that the room had been poisoned and ordered everyone to stay away." She produced a folded message sealed in violet wax. Eleanor did not reach for it. "You had enough time to forge another, and you had enough time to arrange the fire before leaving for the bridge." Adrian took the note, but before he could examine it, wheels thundered beyond the gates. 3 black coaches entered the courtyard, followed by a dozen hired men, wearing the grey armbands of Harcourt and Blythe, one of London's most ruthless creditor houses. Their solicitor stepped down, carrying a leather portfolio. "Adrian Ashcombe, Duke of Ashcombe," he called. "I am Mr. Jonas Pike. Under the authority granted by your signed bond, my clients have taken possession of the Western grain stores, timber rights, mills, and rent revenues until the debt of £48,000 is satisfied." Adrian stared at him. The bond was for 12,000. Pike opened the portfolio. "The principal is 12. The remaining sum consists of penalties triggered by attempted concealment, obstruction of transfer, and the removal of pledged goods." Eleanor understood immediately. Stealing the grain had not merely deprived the villagers, it had manufactured a violation that quadrupled the debt. The forged letters accused her of ordering the removal, so that, when the creditors arrived, Adrian would believe his wife had caused the penalties. His public accusation had cleared Lavinia's path by stripping Eleanor of access before she could prevent the seizure. "Show me the bond," Eleanor said. Pike looked to Adrian. "The Duchess has no authority in this matter. She knows the Western accounts better than anyone alive," Sebastian replied. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. Pike unfolded the document upon the hood of his carriage. Eleanor studied the genuine signature, counterfeit seal, and added clauses. "The last page was substituted," she said. "The paper is newer, and the stitching differs." Pike remained unmoved. The Duke signed across the binding, because someone placed the pages before him, and he failed to read them. Adrian flinched. "Can you prove substitution?" Pike asked. Eleanor looked toward the fire consuming the records room, then toward the empty saddlebag. The duplicate trust deed had burned. The original ledger had vanished. Every conventional path of proof had been removed. "Not tonight," she admitted. "Then possession transfers at noon tomorrow. Any resistance will be reported to the Crown's bench as interference with a lawful creditor." "You cannot seize an entailed estate," Adrian said. "Not the title or principal seat." Pike agreed. "But the Western revenues were converted into private security under the amendment Your Grace signed 6 weeks ago." Adrian finally saw the full consequence of calling Eleanor's relief fund dormant capital. He had voluntarily detached its protection and made it available to creditors. "Who introduced you to this investment?" Eleanor asked. Pike glanced at Lavinia. "Lord Percival Vale." The courtyard went silent. Adrian stepped toward him. "Percival Vale is dead. I met him in London 3 months ago." Lavinia's expression remained composed, but Eleanor saw her fingers tighten around the silver cloak. Pike withdrew a miniature portrait from his portfolio. The painted face belonged unmistakably to Percival Vale, older than in the gallery portraits, but alive. Sebastian had told the truth about the fire. Percival had staged his death, hidden abroad, and returned to exploit Adrian's trust in his daughter. "Where is he now?" Sebastian asked. "I neither know nor care. My concern is the bond." Pike returned the portrait to his pocket and signalled his men. They began posting seizure notices across the stable doors, mill carts, and storehouses. Adrian ordered his servants to remove them, but several men hesitated. Their wages came from the Western revenues. By noon, the Duke might no longer have money to pay them. Authority that had once seemed absolute, now dissolved beneath a document bearing his own signature. Eleanor watched the estate staff look toward her instead. "No one will fight the creditors' men," she said. "Violence will only strengthen their claim. Move the children and elderly tenants away from the mills. Inventory every sack, tool, horse, and cart before anything leaves. Record the names of those who take them." Adrian turned on her. "You said you would perform no duty for this house. I am not saving your house. I am protecting people who had no part in your decision. Pike checked his watch. You have until noon. The nearest magistrate will not hear us before then, Sebastian said. Eleanor looked at the brass key taken from Crow's boot. It was too small for a door or dispatch case. Along its stem were 3 shallow notches, darkened with old soot. She had seen that shape before on the music boxes kept in the family gallery. One had survived the fire 7 years ago, a black lacquer box that Percival Vale had given the old Duke shortly before his death. Eleanor remembered Adrian saying it had never played, because its key was missing. The fire, the forged signatures, Percival's false death, this began long before Lavinia entered our home, she said. She took the key in a handkerchief and looked toward the dark gallery windows above them. If this opens what I think it does. The proof was never kept in the Western Records room. Lavinia moved suddenly toward the house. Sebastian blocked her path. Eleanor faced Adrian. The black music box in your father's gallery. Where is it? Adrian's expression changed. Lavinia moved it this afternoon. To where? Before he could answer, a tremendous crash sounded from inside the hall. Clara ran onto the steps, breathless and terrified. Your Grace! Lady Lavinia ordered the black box thrown into the furnace, but when the footman opened it, he found a hidden compartment. Mr. Crow's men have taken whatever was inside, and they are riding toward Wexford. Pike closed his portfolio. No matter what they carry, Duchess, you have fewer than 11 hours before I take possession. Eleanor looked at the paling eastern sky. To save the tenants and expose the truth, she would have to recover evidence hidden for 7 years before the clock struck noon. Eleanor did not return to the rooms Adrian had ordered prepared for her. She went instead to the dower house, where the Western tenants had already gathered with carts, lanterns, and every surviving record they had kept in their own cottages. Mrs. Finch brought rent receipts wrapped in oilcloth. The miller carried repair invoices, bearing Eleanor's cross sevens. Clara arrived with the household delivery book she had rescued before the fire reached the servants' corridor. Piece by piece, the people Adrian had overlooked began rebuilding the history Lavinia had tried to erase. The dower house became Eleanor's base of action because it stood beyond the main courtyard, and under her marriage settlement, its use and maintenance had been secured to her independently of Adrian's pleasure. He could deny her household keys, but he could not lawfully remove her without challenging the settlement in court. No original leaves this room, Eleanor instructed. Mr. Alden will make copies, and 2 witnesses will sign each page. If anyone asks for a record, they receive a copy and a written account of who requested it. Sebastian examined the brass key beside the black music box, which Clara's brother had recovered from the furnace room before Crow's men escaped. The hidden compartment was empty, but soot had settled around the mechanism in a pattern Eleanor recognized. She inserted the key and turned it once. A faint melody began, uneven after years of silence. On the 3rd measure, 1 note failed to sound. Eleanor opened the lid and found that 1 brass tooth had been deliberately removed from the cylinder. It is not only a music box, she said. It is a code. Her father had used similar mechanical ciphers to protect shipping routes from smugglers. Each raised tooth represented a number. Each missing note directed the reader to a page and line in a corresponding ledger. The papers stolen from the compartment were likely a key to the arrangement, but the mechanism itself still preserved the sequence. Sebastian listened as Eleanor wrote the numbers: 3, 7, 12, 4, 9. The Western Ledger, he said. Page 3, line 7, page 12. Not the ledger we lost. Something older. Clara placed the rescued delivery book on the table. Its first entries dated from the year of the fatal fire. Eleanor opened the indicated pages and found repeated shipments to the old Duke's private study. Violet wax, black lacquer, Belgian stationery, and lamp oil purchased in quantities far greater than the house required. Every delivery had been accepted by Percival Vale. The final coded entry referred to a locked deposit held by Harcourt and Blythe under the initials P.V. Eleanor looked toward Mr. Alden. If Percival used their firm to conceal money stolen before the fire, their current claim rests upon a creditor's conflict they failed to disclose. That could suspend the seizure, Alden said, but only if we prove the account still exists. Mrs. Finch quietly produced a faded receipt. My husband drove Lord Vale to London before he died. He told me to keep this. because Lord Vale refused to pay him. The receipt recorded delivery to Harcourt and Blythe on the morning after Percival's supposed death. It bore the creditor house's stamp and the signature of Jonas Pike's senior partner. Eleanor felt the fragile chain of proof take shape. The music box established the code, the household book established Percival's purchases, and the receipt placed him alive at the creditor's office after the fire. None was decisive alone, but together they exposed a history that the bond could not survive. The dower house door opened. Adrian entered without servants, still wearing the clothes in which he had humiliated Eleanor hours earlier. His face looked older in the morning light. He surveyed the tables, witnesses, copied pages, and tenants waiting for instructions. All this was kept in their cottages, he asked, because I taught them never to surrender the only copy of anything affecting their homes. I believed the records at Ashcombe were sufficient. You believed many things because I made certain your estate continued functioning despite them. He looked at the grain receipts and finally saw years of work he had praised only when another person claimed credit for it. Lavinia told me she reorganized the Western accounts last winter. She changed the labels on the cabinets. I renegotiated the rents, repaired the mill, and created the reserves. Shame crossed his face. I did not know. You did not ask. Adrian placed a small iron strongbox on the table. Inside were Eleanor's household keys, her personal seal, and the emerald necklace. I have confined Lavinia to her rooms. Eleanor did not touch them. Confined under whose guard? Mine. The same guards from whom the original ledger vanished? He flinched. What would you have me do? Publicly withdraw the accusation against me. Restore Clara and every dismissed servant. Place Crow in the custody of the magistrate, not your cellar. Give Mr. Alden authority to examine every bond you signed, and issue a written order that no evidence may be moved without two independent witnesses. If I do this, will you return to Ashcombe? No. The answer landed between them with the finality of a closing door. Cooperation is not reconciliation. I will help prevent innocent families from losing their homes, but I will not resume a marriage in which my dignity depends upon whether you find me useful. Adrian lowered his eyes. You have my terms, Eleanor continued. Accept them or leave. He signed each order at the dower house table while the tenants watched. It was the first costly acknowledgement that his authority required limits. When he finished, Sebastian returned from the stable with 2 horses prepared for London. We can reach Harcourt and Blythe before noon if we take the post road. Eleanor secured the receipt, code sequence, and copied delivery pages inside separate oilskin packets. One remained with Alden, one with Mrs. Finch, and one went beneath her cloak. She and Sebastian had barely reached the lane when a rider emerged from the hedges waving a white cloth. It was Clara's brother. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. Do not go to London, he gasped. Lady Lavinia escaped through the chapel passage. She took Mr. Crow and 3 men with her. They seized Mr. Alden's packet and sent word to Pike that the Duchess forged every tenant receipt during the night. Hoofbeats sounded behind the trees. Before Eleanor could turn, armed riders closed both ends of the lane. Lavinia appeared among them in a dark travelling dress, the original Western ledger held against her chest. Thank you for gathering the remaining evidence for me, she said. Now hand over the music box key, Eleanor, or Sebastian will not live long enough to speak at your trial. Eleanor kept both hands visible and looked carefully at the riders blocking the lane. 3 wore the grey armbands of Harcourt and Blythe, but the remaining 2 were estate grooms, whom Lavinia had dismissed weeks earlier and quietly rehired. Sebastian shifted beside Eleanor, measuring the distance to the nearest weapon. Lavinia noticed. If he moves, Crow shoots Clara's brother first and Sebastian second. Crow raised a pistol behind the injured young man. Eleanor reached slowly beneath her cloak and removed the brass key. You have the original ledger, she said. You have Mr. Alden's packet. Why do you still need this? Because my father concealed the account numbers inside that machine and never trusted me with the sequence. Lavinia's answer came too quickly. Her need for the key proved Percival had not recovered everything from the hidden compartment. Your father is alive, Eleanor said. Why not ask him? A flicker of resentment crossed Lavinia's face. He is waiting at the creditors' assembly. When Ashcombe's Western holdings pass into our control, he will appear as the legitimate representative of the company that purchased the debt. and you believe he will share it with you. Give me the key." Eleanor stepped forward and placed it upon the road. Lavinia ordered one rider to retrieve it. As he bent, Sebastian struck the man from his saddle, and Clara's brother threw himself sideways. Crow fired. The ball tore through Sebastian's coat and grazed his upper arm, but he remained standing. Chaos erupted. Eleanor's pony bolted between two horses, forcing the riders apart. She seized Clara's brother and pulled him behind a stone wall, while Sebastian fought Crow for the pistol. Lavinia snatched the key from the mud and fled toward a waiting carriage. One of her men hurled a lantern into the hedge, and dry leaves caught fire between Eleanor and Sebastian. By the time the smoke cleared, Lavinia, Crow, the ledger, and the captured packet were gone. Sebastian pressed a hand to his bleeding arm. "The key? She has it. Then we have lost the code." "No. We have lost the object she believes controls it." Eleanor opened her hand. A second brass key lay across her palm. During the night at the Dower House, she had asked the village blacksmith to copy the notches, while Mr. Alden recorded the original. Lavinia had taken the duplicate, yet their victory lasted only minutes. When Eleanor and Sebastian returned, they found the Dower House doors forced open, and every tenant driven into the yard beneath guard. Pike had advanced the seizure, claiming Eleanor's attempted journey to London proved she intended to conceal assets. The black music box lay shattered on the floor. Its brass cylinder had been crushed beneath a boot. The delivery book had vanished, and Mrs. Finch's receipt burned in the grate. Mr. Alden had been struck unconscious, while Clara was held beside him under accusation of theft. Lavinia had destroyed the apparent proof and turned its custodians into criminals. "The assembly begins in 1 hour," Pike said. "Your husband's creditors, neighbouring landowners, and a county magistrate are gathering in the Ashcombe ballroom. You may present whatever defence remains, if you still possess one." Eleanor looked at the splintered music box and felt exhaustion descend upon her for the first time. She had protected copies, but without an authenticated original, Lavinia could call every page a fabrication. Sebastian's witness would be attacked as the revenge of a banished brother. Adrian's signature remained genuine. The law would see what could be proved, not what Eleanor knew to be true. Adrian entered the ruined room, carrying a printed notice. "Lavinia has circulated this across the county." It accused Eleanor and Sebastian of an adulterous conspiracy, claimed they had forged records to steal Ashcombe property, and announced Adrian's intention to seek a formal separation. At the bottom appeared his name. "Did you sign it?" Eleanor asked. His silence answered her. "Last night," he admitted. "Before the ball." Lavinia said public certainty would prevent scandal from spreading. Eleanor read the date. Adrian had decided her guilt before confronting her. The dance had never been an angry impulse. It had been a planned public destruction of her reputation. "You intended to separate from me whether I answered your accusation or not. I believed the letters. You refused to examine them because you had already chosen the outcome." Adrian closed his eyes. Yes, the admission carried no comfort, but it was finally honest. "There may be one way to delay the seizure," he continued. "If I declare before the magistrate that I signed the bond while knowingly withholding doubts about its terms, the creditors must investigate fraud before taking possession." Sebastian stared at him. "You would admit negligence in a financial instrument tied to your parliamentary office. I would likely lose the office. The Crown may appoint trustees over part of the estate." Adrian looked at Eleanor. "But the tenants would remain until the claim is heard." "And my reputation?" she asked. "I will withdraw the accusation publicly. I will state that I ordered the notice, denied you access to evidence, and allowed personal resentment to guide my judgment. I cannot restore what I destroyed, but I will not preserve myself by continuing the lie." It was the first offer he had made that cost him something real and promised him nothing in return. Eleanor nodded once. "Tell the truth because it is owed, not because you expect forgiveness." "I understand." "No," she said quietly. "You are beginning to." A servant announced that the creditors' assembly had gathered. Eleanor knelt beside the broken music box and lifted one section of the cylinder. The missing brass tooth had left a rectangular opening, but beneath it she noticed a second set of marks scratched into the metal tiny crosses, placed only beside the numbers 7. She remembered her father's lesson, the habit that had exposed the forged ledger. and suddenly understood the flaw in Percival's design. He had copied the crossed sevens from Eleanor's accounts years before she entered the Ashcombe family, believing they were merely decorative marks. Yet the old delivery book, supposedly recording his code, had been created before her marriage, before any Ashcombe servant had ever seen her handwriting. Lavinia had not only forged the recent ledger, she had altered the older records to manufacture a history connecting the code to Percival's hidden account. She made one mistake, Eleanor said. A mistake no one in that ballroom will recognize, unless we force her father to explain a mark he could not possibly have known. Sebastian looked toward the crowded main house. How do we force him? Eleanor rose, carrying the broken cylinder. We let Lavinia present the original ledger. Then we ask Percival Vale to read his own code aloud, and watch which version of the number 7 he claims belongs to a document written years before I came here. The Ashcombe ballroom had been transformed overnight. The musicians were gone, and in their place stood a long table covered with bonds, ledgers, seals, and creditor notices. The same guests who had watched Eleanor stand alone now filled the galleries above, eager to witness her final disgrace. Jonas Pike sat beside the county magistrate, while Lady Lavinia occupied the chair nearest the head of the table. At her side stood a silver-haired gentleman dressed in mourning black. A murmur passed through the room when he gave his name as Lord Percival Vale, returned from supposed death after 7 years. I survived the Ashcombe fire, Percival announced, but remained abroad because Lord Sebastian threatened to kill me if I revealed that he started it. Sebastian stood near the doors, with his wounded arm bound beneath his coat. 2 constables flanked him, though they had agreed not to arrest him until the hearing concluded. Eleanor had insisted Clara, Mrs. Finch, Mr. Alden, and every tenant witness remain together beneath the protection of the magistrate's own men. Copies of their records had been distributed among 3 separate solicitors. Lavinia would not erase them all with another fire. The Duchess used Sebastian's return to conceal her theft. Percival continued. She forged letters, removed grain, and manufactured false receipts after her husband discovered her adultery. Lavinia placed the original Western ledger on the table. This book proves Eleanor diverted money to Sebastian for years. Eleanor did not defend herself immediately. She allowed the accusation to settle over the room, then looked toward Adrian. The Duke stood where he had commanded the musicians hours earlier. His face was pale, but when he spoke, his voice did not waver. Before her Grace answers, I must correct the record. I publicly accused my wife without allowing her access to the evidence. I ordered the notice alleging adultery. I signed the amended trust and creditor bond without reading every substituted clause, despite her repeated warnings. Lady Lavinia did not force these decisions upon me. I made them from vanity, resentment, and a desire to preserve my authority. Shock moved through the assembly. Pike leaned toward the magistrate. The Duke has admitted negligence. I have, Adrian said. I therefore request immediate suspension of the seizure and surrender my parliamentary office, pending investigation. His confession damaged his standing exactly as he had known it would. Several political allies left the gallery without meeting his eyes. Eleanor felt no triumph in watching him lose what he had valued above her, but neither did she soften the truth. This consequence had begun when he chose humiliation over inquiry. Pike recovered quickly. His negligence does not prove fraud. The bond remains enforceable. Then let us examine the people who profited from it, Eleanor said. She approached the table, carrying the broken music box cylinder wrapped in linen. Lord Vale, you claim this machine belonged to you? Percival nodded. I designed its code for the old Duke, and the household delivery book was its corresponding record. Yes. Explain the sequence. He glanced at Lavinia, then turned the duplicate key inside the blackened mechanism. It failed to fit. The Duchess has altered the key, or your daughter took a copy because I retained the original. Eleanor produced the genuine key and inserted it. The cylinder moved despite its damaged teeth, playing the uneven sequence of notes. Percival identified them as page and line references, leading to payments he claimed the old Duke had authorized. Did you personally mark the coded entries? Eleanor asked. I did, including the small crosses beside every 7. Yes, it was my private notation. Eleanor placed one of her authenticated childhood account books beside the ledger. Mr. Alden confirmed that it had remained in his firm's archive for 15 years, long before Eleanor married Adrian. Every 7 carried the same cross. That notation was taught to me by my father, she said. It appears nowhere in Ashcombe accounts before my arrival. Yet the delivery book you claim to have marked 7 years ago contains it on every altered page. Percival's confidence faltered. Many clerks cross their 7s. But you do not. She produced 3 letters Percival had written before the fire, preserved by the miller because they concerned a disputed timber order. His 7s were plain and uncrossed. Someone added coded entries to the old delivery book after studying my handwriting, Eleanor continued. Those additions were made to connect recent forgeries with a secret account Percival had already established. Lavinia rose. The Duchess could have altered the book herself. Then, tell us when. It remained in the servant's office until you removed it yesterday, and Clara recorded every person who entered. Clara stepped forward with the surviving delivery register. It showed Lavinia requesting the old books 6 times during the previous month, under the pretense of researching the fire. Eleanor next placed the violet wax, counterfeit seal, and green ribbon before the magistrate. Sebastian described seeing Lavinia compose the letters at a Dover inn, while Crow practiced Eleanor's signature from stolen household orders. Mrs. Finch presented the copied receipt, placing Percival at Harcourt and Blythe after his supposed death. Pike called each item circumstantial, but Eleanor had not yet reached the trap. Lord Vale, what was the number of the private account hidden by the music box code? Percival hesitated. Lavinia answered for him. 371249. And where was that account held? Harcourt and Blythe. Pike objected. My firm's private records cannot be opened upon a duchess's speculation. Eleanor turned to the magistrate. Then ask Mr. Pike whether account 371249 exists, and who has drawn from it. The magistrate ordered Pike to produce the firm's sealed register. Reluctantly, he unlocked his portfolio and found the numbered entry. The account exists, he admitted. It was opened by Percival Vale. Read the most recent withdrawal. Pike's face changed. £12,000, transferred 6 weeks ago. To whom? He remained silent. Lavinia began edging toward the side door, but the constables blocked her. Eleanor looked at the emerald necklace around Lavinia's throat and remembered the violet wax upon her bracelet, the detail that had begun everything. Read the recipient's name, she said. Pike swallowed and turned the register so the magistrate could see the line. The room leaned forward as the magistrate examined the signature, then looked up at the one person no one had yet suspected.